Today we have the fortune of the association of Her Grace Malati Devidasi Mataji, who's one of the most senior disciples of Srila Prabhupada. We'd like to extend a warm welcome to Mataji today for our Srila Prabhupada Smaranotsav program as part of the 126th appearance anniversary of Srila Prabhupada. Although Mataji does not need an introduction, I'd like to quickly introduce and glorify Mataji for my own purification. Mataji, do I have your permission to quickly introduce you, Mataji?
Hare Krishna. Yeah, it's your show. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna. So Malati Devidasi joined ISKCON in San Francisco, United States of America. She was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in San Francisco in early 1967 and became an integral part of the pioneer years of ISKCON. In 1968, along with her 6-week-old daughter Saraswati, Malati Devidasi was part of a team of 6 adults to first establish Krishna consciousness in the United Kingdom. This epic adventure resulted in the release of the Radha Krishna Temple album in 1969, produced by Beatle George Harrison. The Hare Krishna Mahamantra and other devotional songs are featured on this recording, which received worldwide attention. She often traveled with her husband Shyama Sundar Prabhu, who was Srila Prabhupada's personal secretary. Among other tasks, Malati Devidasi cooked for Srila Prabhupada. She was sent to India by Srila Prabhupada to begin International Society for Krishna Consciousness in India, beginning with the World Sankirtan, where they were being sent from one city to the next performing Harinam Sankirtan and putting on large outdoor events attended by thousands until ISKCON began getting their own temples. During her sojourn, she assisted with the purchase and shipping of several sets of temple murtis to establish deity worship services in the American temples of Detroit, Dallas, Toronto, and Chicago. This experience introduced her to the process of purchasing murtis, a service she continued to carry out for various temples. She returned to the UK for some time to assist in establishing the property known as the Bhakti Vedanta Manor in Watford, London, acquired with the help of George Harrison. While in Europe, Malati Devidasi conducted traveling programs for women, thus sharing Krishna consciousness in the Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, and propagating the philosophy, practice, and reading the books of Srila Prabhupada. In 1990, she established an all-female ISKCON temple, which later was awarded a large road-sized bronze plaque by the state of the Ohio Historical Society, recognizing the center as the first Vaishnava Hindu temple in the state, mentioning in detail its unique status in training women in Krishna consciousness. Malati Devidasi joined the GBC in 1998, and her responsibilities are focused in the USA. Her zonal areas include Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, and Western Pennsylvania. A founding member of the Vaishnavi ministry, formerly known as the Women's Ministry, Malati Devidasi facilitated such activities as annual international retreats targeted at promoting the spiritual advancement, especially of women in ISKCON. These retreats were very highly organized events, offering classes, seminars, and workshops by some of the more senior women in the movement and reflect the teachings of Srila Prabhupada. Malati Devidasi personally organized the annual Vaishnavi retreat in New Vrindavan, West Virginia, which began in 2000 and went on continuously at a stretch for 12 long years. Another project of Mataji is the Festival of Inspiration, also held at New Vrindavan for 12 consecutive years until 2012. This was one of North America's largest gatherings with the theme of Vaishnava education and culture, and was well attended by devotees from all around the world. Malati Devidasi spends most of her time traveling, offering classes and instructions in Krishna conscious practice and philosophy, and is a regular participant in inter-religious gatherings. She holds deep concern for the future of ISKCON in general and for the youth in particular. She advocates engaging women in all manners of service, as inspired by Srila Prabhupada, who always engaged her in service. So with these few words, since Mataji's glories are unlimited, but we want to hear from Mataji today. So with these few words, I invite Her Grace Malati Mataji, to share your experiences with Prabhupada, your realizations with Prabhupada, and encourage all of the participants on Zoom and also watching us on YouTube to encourage us and kindly grace the occasion. Hare Krishna, Mataji. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Madhavi Devidasi. Hare Krishna. So, my honor to be here with you all today. And the topic is definitely, for me, very wonderful. Remembering Srila Prabhupada. And let me ask you, can you hear all right before is the sound volume all right?
Yes, Mataji.
Okay. And the other thing is, right now we're having a storm and it could result in the internet being knocked out. And if that happens, it's out of my control. So let's hope it doesn't happen. But I just wanted to warn you. So. Om Gyantamarandasya Janana Sakalaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Kaskatila Saratarine Sri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So I'm speaking to you today from New Vrindavan, West Virginia, USA. And Srila Prabhupada has mentioned in lectures and in one purport in the Srimad Bhagavatam that New Vrindavan is non-different from Vrindavan. So I would like to invite anyone who is able to come and visit this most sacred holy place. It was made sacred and holy by the presence of Srila Prabhupada on several occasions. So before speaking about specific pastimes, our interactions with this divine grace, I would just like to give a little preamble. And some of you may have heard me mention this before, but it is something that I find is extremely important that we understand in terms of referencing Srila Prabhupada, especially as time is passing. Because Srila Prabhupada, for those of us who were present with him, is a living memory. And for those who came later, you are hearing from us, and the memory is coming to you, but it may or may not be a living memory. Just because you did not meet him in person doesn't mean the memory of Prabhupada is not a living memory. But if you don't cultivate that association with Prabhupada, then the memory becomes shadowed, it becomes lost. And just like yesterday, I was speaking with our wonderful host, and I wanted to go over the introduction because I have found that quite often when people introduce me, they're saying things that are like, where did you get this? It's like not the way it was. It didn't even happen because the memories become distorted through passage of time. But it's really important that we remain dedicated to the memory of Srila Prabhupada, just like Bhagavad Gita as it is, Srila Prabhupada as he is, not as he was, because he's ever present with us. And you can have that same personal experience by cultivating devotion to Srila Prabhupada. Now, sometimes it's said that members of ISKCON are too much focused, are too much centered on Srila Prabhupada. I don't know if you've heard that, but I've certainly heard it and I've read it. We too much, but Srila Prabhupada was empowered by Lord Krishna to do what no other spiritual master had ever done before. He spread the message of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtan mission worldwide. He's the one who took the message outside of the shores of Bharat Bhumi, out of India. No one else did this before Srila Prabhupada. And after Srila Prabhupada, many wonderful acharyas have gone and preached also. But Srila Prabhupada is the one who spread the message, took it internationally, as was desired by Lord Chaitanya. So Srila Prabhupada is not just another name or another photo in the line of disciplic succession of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. I mean, after the departure of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there were many brilliant acharyas. However, very soon, actually, disturbance ensued, as well as many false followers and many false sampradayas. And we face that same dynamic today. It's been barely 50 years since the departure of Srila Prabhupada, and there are many, what I call PP, post-Prabhupada, means after Prabhupada, interjections coming into the movement, things that Prabhupada did not introduce and are not in line with what he did introduce. So we have to be very careful. We're the caretakers, we're the gatekeepers for ISKCON. We don't say that there are no other spiritual masters. We don't say that there's no other bona fide acharyas. We know that there are, and we honor and respect all sincere seekers of the truth. However, as members of ISKCON, we are fully dedicated, and our devotion to Srila Prabhupada is exclusive. It's not fanaticism. It's that devotion, that loyalty to Prabhupada that will help us advance in our spiritual life. If you are driving, just like yesterday, a friend was driving from New York to New Vrindavan. It's about an 8-hour drive. Never been here before. And a couple times they weren't sure, so they would ask somebody. And the person would tell them what they thought might be the path. But it turns out they didn't know what they were talking about, which meant the person got a little lost. In the same way, if we go outside of ISKCON to ask and challenge Srila Prabhupada's teachings, we could also become spiritually lost. So it's always best to stick to the pure teachings of Srila Prabhupada as members of ISKCON. We're not saying other paths are not favorable, but for us, this exclusive devotion to Srila Prabhupada is our best path, and it's not fanaticism. Now, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, a great acharya, paramacharya, appeared in this world, I think it was 1834. And he pioneered and reestablished the purity and solidified the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, interestingly enough, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was not born into a Vaishnava family. In fact, his family was worshippers of Chandi. However, by a very unusual dynamic, you can't say chance, because Srila Prabhupada taught there is no chance. Everything is coming by the will of the Supreme Lord. So by the will of the Lord, this young person born into a family of worshipers, they were celebrating certain holidays. We were just, oh no, how can they do that? He was describing how the family compound, very large, they were a wealthy family, a big compound surrounded by naturally a perimeter, like a large wall around the compound. And they would have a celebration once a year where they would bring in a buffalo and kill it. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, little boy, was watching this, and he saw everybody was in a merry mood. He says, everybody was enjoying themselves except the buffalo. He could understand that there was something about this ceremony that was not really in accord with a higher consciousness. At a young age, he got this. And Krishna reciprocated with his desire for knowledge. Reciprocated with this young boy, very young, with his desire for pure knowledge. And, knowledge can come from anywhere. Like they say, you can take gold even from a filthy place. But he didn't go to a filthy place. I'm just saying that it was an unusual source that he learned about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that source was the chowkidar for the compound. So at night, there was a night guard. Naturally, most of you might, be familiar with that. And even in your own homes, you may have a night guard. And there was a little window in the wall. And in that little window, which was the room of Bhaktivinoda, he would call out to the chowkidar, night guard, come here. And he would ask him questions, very deep questions about the meaning of life, And he's just a chowkidar. It means he's not probably highly educated. But one does not need a high degree to be a devotee of Krishna. And this chowkidar was a Vaishnava, a devotee of Krishna. And he introduced to Srila Bhaktivinoda, he introduced him to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he told him about the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So interestingly enough, later on, the Bhaktivinoda, he moved along in his life. He got married at the age of 12 years old. The wife was 5 or 6. Nowadays that would be a very shocking thing, but it was kind of common then. He went on, he got his college. He was trying to find a profession where he could be able to continue his search, his seeking, and have kind of a life that was not filled with too many sinful activities. So he thought about this Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he was trying to find a copy of it. Now he's living in West Bengal. You would think this is a very easy thing to do. But no, he could not even find a copy of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Much later in his life, he got that copy. Somebody who knew that he was trying to find it. Much later means he was actually in between 29 and 32, I think. Was younger, but later in life from that point. So somebody presented him with a copy of Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he began to read it and reread it, deeply study. And as a result of that deep study, he became imbued with firm faith of the divinity of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Means he understood that Mahaprabhu was none other than Krishna himself. That was very rare. Most people did not get that connection. And then he looked around and he saw how the people were not following the pure teachings of Mahaprabhu, and he was quite distressed. And he made it his duty in life to reestablish that purity and solidify the teachings of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in this way, he was assisted by his son, who became known as Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And they were a dynamic preaching team. They defeated impersonalism and the Mayavadis. They reestablished the Yuga Dharma, the supremacy of the Mahamantra as the prime benediction for humanity at large in Kali Yuga. Now, Lord Chaitanya, just a minute, I have to turn the fan off. It's really cold here. And if I don't turn the fan off, I'm going to start coughing. So just pause a moment. Okay. Well, if it didn't get off, at least it'll, sorry about that. So, interestingly enough, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur understood. Why I say interestingly enough, because it was not at all understood by the regular followers of Mahaprabhu. But Lord Chaitanya, as you all must know, he was saying, my name will be chanted in every town and village. And most people were thinking in terms of the land of India. Very few, practically no one, understood this meant the whole world. Every town and village, emphasis on every. Didn't say India. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had that broad vision, that deep understanding and realization. And in 1896, he had completed a small book called The Life and Precepts of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in the first attempt at broader preaching, he sent that book outside of India. There was one copy found in the British Museum by Guru Das when we first went to England. There was another one in McGill University in Montreal, Canada. So this was the first, and that was also found by devotees. So this was the first attempt at broad preaching. That was in 1896. And what else happened in 1896? Srila Prabhupada took his appearance. So you can see that wonderful parallel that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta was opening the doorway for Srila Prabhupada, although he hadn't even heard of Srila Prabhupada because Srila Prabhupada was just born in September 1st of 1896. So Srila Prabhupada entered into this mood. He didn't enter willingly into the mood of vast world preaching. You all know the story, I'm sure, about how he came to meet his spiritual master unwillingly. His friend was, come, I want you to meet this sadhu. And he goes, no, I'm not interested. At that time, he was a member of Mahatma Gandhi's freedom movement to get free from the British oppression. And his father had always had sadhus coming in the house. And Abai was, as he was known, was a very observant young man. And he could see some of these sadhus were just, I call them TN, total nonsense. They were just in dress only, and they were not, they weren't really worthy of the title sadhu or swami or saintly person. But his father, being a very humble, sincere Vaishnava, he equally honored all people, so they would come. But Abai was not impressed. And now he's being asked by his friend, come and meet this, sadhu, this swami, and he's like, no, thank you. But you know how it is, peer pressure. Somebody is asking, come do something. You actually don't want to do it, but it's your friend, it's your peer, and they're saying, please. So to please that person, you will agree. So that was the case here. Srila Prabhupada Abai, he agreed to meet this person. And you all know what happened. He goes up the stairs. He's respectful, so he's making obeisances. He hadn't even practically got his head off the floor when Srila Bhakti Siddhanta uttered those famous words, which became the life mission of Srila Prabhupada. You are an educated young man. Take this message of Mahaprabhu and preach all over the world. Prabhupada was not immediately accepting this. He said, we're under the subjugation of the British. Who is going to listen to us? Until we're free from that subjugation, no one will listen to us. Sounds like Arjuna, right? When Arjuna was told to go out and fight, then he had all these reasons why not to fight. Hey, I'll kill my relatives. That's not good. I'll do that. So Prabhupada had a pretty good reason, it seemed. However, there was superior reasoning at hand. So Srila Bhakti Siddhanta responded to Prabhupada's idea that we can't say anything to anybody until we're free. So this message, this sublime message of Godhead, this sublime message of Krishna consciousness is not subjected to any material, mundane consideration. It's purely transcendental. And Srila Prabhupada, who had been among his friends, he explained to us, he had always been the leader. And that they'd have a debate, like nowadays people have arguments and they fight, but back then people, if they would have a debate but it was honorably presented. They didn't fight with each other. So they'd have a debate. And Srila Prabhupada said, I always won. He said, for the first time, I was defeated, and I liked it very much because he was defeated by a superior personality, a godly, saintly, a real saintly personality. So Prabhupada entered into this mood of wide, broad preaching, as was exemplified already by Srila Bhakti Vinod and Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. In the Antya Lila of the Caitanya Charitamrita, it is expressed how the fundamental religious system in Kali is chanting the holy names of Krishna. It says, unless one is empowered by Krishna, one cannot propagate the Sankirtan movement. As such, Srila Prabhupada, we can understand, was empowered. This means Shaktavesh avatar, empowered living entity sent by the Lord Krishna to fulfill a specific task. Lord Jesus, Prabhupada explained, was also Shaktavesh avatar, sent by the Lord for a specific task. So Srila Prabhupada fulfilled the prediction of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by ensuring that his holy name would be chanted in every town and village all over the world. And ISKCON followers, we develop our love for Krishna by strictly following in the line and footsteps of Srila Prabhupada. And this is not fanaticism. In the Bhagavatam, 1:7-1928, Sri Prahlad is stating the same allegiance. My dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, due to association with material desires, I was gradually falling into a blind well full of snakes. But your servant, Narada Muni, kindly took me as his disciple, his siksha, and he instructed me to achieve transcendence. Therefore, it is my first duty to serve him. And here is something, these words, 2 sentences, supremely important. It is therefore my duty, because you have received this knowledge from your spiritual master, it is my duty to serve him. How could I ever leave his service? So this is a very profound instruction. And Srila Prabhupada exemplified this same precise devotion to his Guru Maharaj. So many examples, but I will give an example that I personally experienced that profoundly affected me throughout my life in Krishna consciousness. I was initiated by him in January 1967 in San Francisco, California. It was the first initiation in San Francisco, and there were 4 of us, myself, Shamsundar, Harsharani, and Haridas. So shortly afterwards, well, by shortly, it means like around in the end of May of 67, Prabhupada suffered a health crisis. And the devotees were beside themselves what to do. It happened to be Memorial Day weekend, which is a national holiday. Everything is closed, at least it used to be, everything closed down. Everybody gets out of town. You go somewhere else, somewhere more peaceful and nicer than the city. Even the doctors weren't in town. And they were trying to find a doctor, and they couldn't find a doctor. And then they took them to a hospital. And Srila Prabhupada didn't want to go to the hospital, but the devotees couldn't just not do anything. So after a certain point, he said, get me out of here. He said, they're just simply taking my blood, pricking me, sticking me and taking my blood. And the doctor said, no, Swami, the Swami's old man, he will die, but Prabhupada said, if you leave me here, I'll die. So Garga Muni very bravely found a hospital, coat like the doctors wear, and acting like he was a doctor, he took one of those bed on wheels, took Prabhupada down, and they took him away. Now, he wasn't getting so much better, and the devotees had made an arrangement to have a small cottage on the Jersey Shore. Jersey Shore means New Jersey, which is below New York, and it has quite an expansive ocean. So they were thinking ocean air, ocean breeze, fresh air, ocean breeze, sunlight. This will assist his healing. But as luck would have it, it was cloudy, it was damp, there was no breeze, it was just not optimum. Just like today is here in New Vrindavan. It's cloudy, it's damp, there's a storm going on. We're going to be having a big festival this evening, but if you look outside, you're going to think maybe we should have a festival of umbrellas instead of a pushpa abhishek. Anyways, it didn't work out. So they made an arrangement in San Francisco to bring him to Marin County to a little house, nice little place, again on the shore of the ocean, but this time the Pacific Ocean, not the Atlantic, and hoping for better improvement. While he was there, during that time, we actually had our first Raviotra Festival, and he could not attend because he wasn't feeling well enough, and the drive from San Francisco to Stinson Beach, where he was on Highway 1, which was like very high cliffs, you just a big, huge, thousands of feet of a drop, and you're going to be in the ocean, and the road is zigzag. So, it can give you motion sickness. So as he was already not feeling well, he could not imagine taking that trip. So he remained on the day of the Rath Yatra, he remained in Stinson Beach. And the next day, we brought the deities to see him, and they stayed there for 5 days. There wasn't an altar, but there was this piano, and we put a nice cloth, and they were taken care of there. Anyways, after some time there, he was seeing he was not getting any better. So he told the devotees, I'm going to come to San Francisco, and I have an announcement to make. Now, at that time, we were still a fairly small handful of devotees. And we were so elated about Swamiji coming to San Francisco again. And we had no idea what that announcement was going to be. So he came, and all of us are there sitting around him. And he always sat very erect, even when he wasn't well. Like sometimes if he wasn't well, he would kind of sit like a little bit slumped over, but when he would speak, he would just sit right up, like as if nothing was wrong. He wasn't really well, but he was very erect sitting. And he told us that he was going to return to India. Said, I'm going home to India. By home, he meant Vrindavan. I'm going home to India to try to recover. He said, I'm an old man. I may die at any time. I want you, boys and girls, to push on this movement. Now, I cannot tell you what a shock that was to us. Up until that time, we were at his orders and his request. We were going out and preaching as the best we could for people that were like, we weren't even toddlers. We were like, preschoolers. We had only Prabhupada to turn to. The senior devotees were like 5 minutes older than us. We were just very, very pre-neophyte, honestly speaking. But we had Prabhupada, we have a saying, and I don't know if you say this in India, but we say, he has our back. It means whatever we do, he's there behind us, has our back. So it was like that. He was always there. Even if he was in New York, he'd have our back. He was there for us. We could write a letter and he would immediately answer without internet, no internet. We didn't have to worry. He would answer by hand, by typewriter. If it was urgent, we could. Didn't do that very often, but we could do it. And we didn't bother him with stupid little problems most of the time. And if we had somebody asked us a question that we didn't know, we would just say, I don't know the answer, but my spiritual master does. I'll ask him and I'll find out. So in that way, he had our back. So now here he was saying he was going to leave, and he was an old man and may die at any time. Well, we knew he was elderly, but we never thought of him as an old man. I mean, maybe it should have been obvious, but it wasn't how we saw him because of his incredible exuberance and the purity that he emanated. Like the old people we knew, like from our family, they were really obviously old. And, they'd sit on a rocking chair on the front porch and just, spend the day doing nothing, rocking back and forth in their rocking chair or something like that, playing bingo, whatever. Here was a dynamic personality who could he could outpace us. The oldest member in Islam at that time was not quite 30. I think Jayananda was the oldest person. Satsarup was about 27. We were very young, and the rest of us anywhere from 16 to 22, 23, 24, very young people. And we had a saying as former hippies, as the hippie people, many of us were formerly hippies. So we had a saying. We said, never trust anyone over 30. So here, and we really were sincere about that. We didn't, one day a lady that was 37 years old came to our temple, and we were so suspicious. What does this old lady want? Like, she was 37 years old. So that old lady turned out to be Shilavati. But anyway, we just had that mood, but we didn't see Prabhupada as an old man. So now he's reminding us, I'm an old man. I may die at any time. Well, we all know the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, the Yuga Dharma. We all know that mantra. And then there was this other mantra, birth, death, disease, and old age. We knew that one, but we didn't attribute the old age part to Srila Prabhupada. It wasn't part of the way we saw him. And suddenly we're being reminded, strongly reminded. And then he says, so I want you boys and girls to push on this movement. So that's when we realized, wait a minute. Well, some of us were shocked. We weren't even thinking this was a movement yet. It was like, just New York, the group in New York, the group in San Francisco, just this little group of people with Swamiji. And wait a minute, push on the movement? How are we going to do that if he's not here with us? Who will we ask? Who will we turn to? Now, we knew that before Srila Prabhupada came to America, that he tried to enlist several, like God Brothers, our grand disciples of God Brothers. Please come and help me preach. You can read the letters, they're there. Come and you don't have to worry about anything. I'll take care of everything. Just come and preach. The people in America, they don't know anything about Radha and Krishna, and they're miserable. So with that in mind, we thought, one person raised their hand, and they said, Swamiji, would it be all right in your absence if we requested one of your God brothers to come and help us? Now, for sure, we were not trying to replace Srila Prabhupada. By that point, our hearts were bound and sealed to him. But he just asked us to carry on this movement, use the word, push on this movement. How are we going to do that? We suddenly felt ourselves very inadequate. So that question was put to him. And he, as I mentioned, was sitting very erect. And he was very silent, and the whole room became very silent. It was so silent, you could feel the silence. In the Bhagavatam, they say that the 16,000 sages in the Namaskaran forest, they were so silent, you could hear a pin drop in the sand. It was that kind of silence. And when he spoke, It was in a very low, deliberate voice. And he said, "My spiritual master saved me. He was not an ordinary man." And then he said, "If anyone were to come and change anything, any word that I have taught you, the whole thing will be spoiled. Everything I have to teach you is in these books." At that point in time, we only had the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam in 3 parts. That was it. Everything I have to teach you is in these books. Imagine the importance of this statement. Imagine the importance, if you can, of the Srimad Bhagavatam first canto. But what we couldn't understand then, that he was protecting us. He was protecting us and ISKCON from outside influences. We couldn't understand that, but he could. And he was inspiring our faith. He was teaching us. He taught us how to come to the constant stage of remembrance of Krishna by his own example of faithfulness and purity. If anybody tried to glorify him, "Oh, Swamiji, you have done this or that," I have not done anything. If I have done anything, it is that I simply followed the instructions of my spiritual master, of my Guru Maharaj, and I did not change anything. This was his loyalty to his spiritual master. He built faith through strong lectures, his honesty, his transparency. There were no scandals surrounding his character. He embodied faith in a world of cheating and disappointment. So developing faith inspires gratitude and obligation towards the spiritual master. And this is experienced through service. When we accept something from the Guru, like spiritual knowledge, we accept his teachings, a debt is formed. We are obliged to reciprocate. It means we should follow his instructions. So this reciprocation, this is the real meaning of Guru Dakshin. You know, you get initiated, and sometimes the people go out, practically always anyway, they go out, they put their little, like this, give me some dakshin, and people put some money there. That's okay, and you give it to the Guru. But the real, more important dakshin is that you follow the instructions of the spiritual master. And the spiritual masters nowadays are successful when they follow exactly and precisely the instructions of Srila Prabhupada. So what did Srila Prabhupada want? He wanted that we love Krishna. And to attain that love, we must follow his instructions and not someone else's. I mean, someone else outside of his. Prabhupada introduced the regulative principles, 16 rounds minimum, guru-disciple relationship, basic program, avoiding sinful life, and following his orders is not sentimental, it is essential. In the Bhagavatam 434, it's explaining how the satisfaction of the Guru is the secret of advancement in spiritual life. Prabhupada would insist, "I'm not a great devotee. My only qualification is my 100% faith in my spiritual master." And this loyalty was Srila Prabhupada's source of power to pioneer and spread the Sankirtan movement worldwide. And to be effective, his followers, that means all of us, have to teach and bolster faith in Srila Prabhupada and represent him effectively. So when I'm asked to speak about Srila Prabhupada, of course, there are many wonderful wonderful, stories that I can mention, and I will mention some, but it's not that I want to entertain anybody. It's like I'm not really interested in entertaining people. Telling a story and having people ha ha ha, it's not the point. If I'm telling stories about Prabhupada, I want you to feel more deeply connected to Srila Prabhupada. That is why I might want to say some things about him. So, okay, I just realized I have to be a little mindful of the time, right? So there's maybe about 15 minutes now, and then we go to Q&A. Is that correct? Okay, so I'll just give a few examples that represent, there's so many qualities of Srila Prabhupada, and I believe I was asked to mention a few qualities. So Srila Prabhupada was creative. He was an original creative thinker and planner. And an example of this creativity and original thinking and planning is ISKCON itself and its deployment in the Western Hemisphere. It was the first organization to bring Gaudiya Vaishnavism in authenticity outside of India. Another example of Srila Prabhupada is that he was intuitive. He could immediately sense something, often before it was even revealed or even known to others. I experienced when we were in Surat, which is, of course, you all know, a beautiful province in India, in Gujarat. We had an incredible reception in Surat. We were there with Prabhupada under the banner of the World Sankirtan movement. And that place just welcomed Srila Prabhupada magnificently. There would be daily harinams, and in the morning paper, the route would be printed, so people knew where we would be going that day. And in the older part of town, now Surat is, probably quadruple or 10 times the size as it was then, but the route would be noted, and the people on the route would decorate their homes and the streets, rangoli through the whole streets. They would crisscross the street with mango leaves from one house to the next, on one side to the other. They would shout, put garlands on us, but there would be so many garlands, we'd have to take them off. We couldn't breathe. It was wonderful. They were so enthusiastic to receive us. And then in the evening would be a gigantic outdoor program. We called them the Pandal programs. Thousands of people would come to meet Srila Prabhupada. This was such a phenomena. Somebody had gone outside of India. They'd spread Krishna consciousness. And here they were now with their followers, these foreign people who had become Vaishnavas. So during this wonderful time, which was just like, it was like a page out of history, so I was confronted with a potentially life-changing situation, and it wasn't known to others or even to Srila Prabhupada, and I was feeling adrift and distraught. So one afternoon, in the afternoons there would be darshan, people could come to his room. So I was sitting in the doorway at the end of the room, half in the room, half out, kind of in the little shadows. And then everybody left, but I stayed there. And I was about to leave, and he called me forward. And he said, "Is there something?" And I blurted out my situation in 6 words, and he responded in 8 words. And in doing so, he completely adjusted the distressed situation to perfection, even before it manifested. And it was at this time that he asked Shyam Sundar to become his personal secretary. Another wonderful quality of Srila Prabhupada, he was genuine. I don't know if you have a similar saying in whatever language you may be speaking, but we have an English saying, the Real Mccoy. The Real Mccoy means genuine. It means authentic. Srila Prabhupada was the Real McCoy, totally authentic, completely genuine. In the early San Francisco days, he was a guest of a radio show that featured live interviews. We warned him that the interviewer, the person who was the host for the show, was known for his rude behavior towards the guest. And even though you knew you would be insulted, famous people were happy to go on that show because there was such a huge audience. But we did not want to see Prabhupada being insulted, so we were hesitant. But he agreed to go. He said at least the radio audience would hear the name of Krishna. This was Prabhupada's, like if he'd read an article in the newspaper, he would count how many times Krishna's name was mentioned. Even if the article was totally unfavorable, he didn't care. Look, Krishna's name was mentioned so many times. So he was agreeable to go. One part of the show would be the guest would speak for a period of time, and then the listening audience at their homes would call in on our telephones. In those days, dial-up phones, really old-fashioned, landline. So we'd call in, right? So Prabhupada spoke, and somehow or other, the guy didn't interrupt, he didn't say anything, and then he goes, now let's turn to the radio audience. And the first person, Swamiji, what is the meaning of Hare Krishna? It was Gargamuni. The next caller, Swamiji. So after the next caller, the person figured out, it sounds like these are your followers, your disciples. So let's see if we can hear from somebody else. And then we thought, okay, now he's gonna like. So then this lady goes, Swamiji. It was like that kind of Swamiji. So you came to America on a boat? Yes. And you didn't pay. You had free passage? Yes. So Swamiji, you're a freeloader? Now, freeloader is a really rude thing. It means a person who wants something for nothing. Prabhupada simply replied, yes. You know, like he wasn't flustered. Yeah, I'm freeloader. I got a free passage. So now we expected that host to really like hear he was going to get into it. You know what he did? He goes, well, that's enough of her. And he knocked her off. So Srila Prabhupada's purity, his genuineness, his authenticity melted the heart of that hardcore host who never lost an opportunity to slam anybody, no matter who they were. And for the first time, maybe he didn't understand. Here was a pure devotee of the Lord. But he understood was a genuine person, and he respected Srila Prabhupada. He was very caring. When he would arrive, he would always ask, is everything all right? Sometimes in advance, people would be thinking, when he gets here, you know how it is in temple life, there's always some little something that goes on. It's not always super smooth. And people would be thinking, oh, when Swamiji gets here, I'm going to tell him this, I'm going to tell him that. And then he'd arrive, is everything all right? And everybody, Jai Srila Prabhupada, yes. And the amazing thing would be, it would be all right. Suddenly, no problem. But he would come and he wanted to know how the disciples were faring. He would ask about our children. He would ask, and how is Miss Saraswati? That was my daughter. He was concerned about the Gurukula children, if they were being fed enough, if they were getting sufficient rest. He would ask about our health, both men and women. And when we were getting prepared to go to London at that time, in 68, I was pregnant. And he told Shamsundar, wait until I deliver the child and rest some before going. So when we left, by the time we left, she was like 6 weeks old. In New Vrindavan, there was a ladies' Sankirtan team. It meant they would travel outside and distribute books. So when Prabhupada came, that ladies, all the Sankirtan teams were coming back, and the ladies' team got back a little late. And Prabhupada was having a wonderful outdoor darshan, and they just jumped out of their van and joined the darshan. And at one point, he's looking out and he goes, are you all right? And everybody's kind of looking, who's he talking to, And he looks again, are you all right? And Gopalasha Priya, you mean me? She's pointing me. Yes, are you all right? Are you warm enough? Because it was a little, the breeze, it was in the evening, so it was maybe slightly chilly. So he saw she didn't have a covering on, and so he was concerned. Are you all right? Are you warm enough? And then he turns to the temple president, Kaladri Prabhu, and he goes, once a month, you must call the women and you must ask them if they need anything. They are naturally shy and they won't say. So you must ask them. So our lives were flooded with his affection. In a letter to Janaki and others, he wrote, as you are remembering me, I am remembering you. And in the letter to Jamuna, he had typed a letter to Jamuna, and at the bottom of the letter in his handwriting, he wrote, how is Janaki, my naughty daughter? Janaki and Jamuna were sisters. So Janaki was the first female disciple of Srila Prabhupada. But he loved us as no one else did. That was the first thing we felt from him, this love. Not even our own parents had that love. And in return, we loved him and we trusted him completely by offering our lives to serve his mission. He always called us by our names. My name is Malati Dasi, and I made sure I was introduced like that today because nowadays, for some reason, people think our names is Malati Mataji, which is not the name Prabhupada gave me. So here's the letter, and it was the one time that Srila Prabhupada did refer to us as mothers. So this is February 20th, 1969. My dear little mothers, Jamuna, Malati, and Janaki, please accept my blessings. I lost my mother when I was only 14 years old, so I didn't get much of my mother's affection in my childhood. But in my old age, Krishna has given me so many young mothers to take care of me. Another mother, Govinda Dasi, is there in Hawaii. She's always asking me to go there, so I will go there within this month. So you can just see this affection. I mean, I could actually probably give a class on Janaki's relationship with Prabhupada. It was so beautiful, and it was totally without any intimidation. No Aishwarya. She would sometimes scold. She would scold Prabhupada. Like I'll give a quick example because I see we have 3 minutes. But when we got the apartment for Prabhupada, it was above the temple in San Francisco, right? So he comes to San Francisco. And by the way, when he came to San Francisco, so his first visit, there was a historic thing. He took an airplane for the first time because he first arrived on a boat, right? So first time he took an airplane, ever flew in an airplane, was from New York to San Francisco, American Airlines, New York to Chicago, Chicago to San Francisco. So his apartment was on the 3rd floor, looking over the street, and Janaki Mukunda had an apartment 2 doors down so that there would be someone near him. And it was a building that had a buzzer. You unless you had a key, then you had to be buzzed in. Well, somehow or other, this kind of crazy lady got in, and she banged on Prabhupada's door, and he opened it up, and she rushes in his room. Swamiji, will you marry me? And Prabhupada goes, I can't marry you, I'm a sannyasi. And she wouldn't leave, so he went out to go over to Mukunda's, and when he went out, the door closed, so then it locked. And so he goes over to Mukunda's, and he's, telling Mukunda had a spare key, so he's going back to deal with the situation. And Janaki goes up to Srila Prabhupada, Swamiji, she's shaking his head, Swamiji, never leave your apartment without the key. It is giving him that motherly chastisement. Anyway, very sweet. I can tell you one other quick one. We were downstairs, Janaki and myself, in the temple. We were cooking. And the mail came, and we looked, and there was a blue aerogram. I don't even think they have aerograms anymore. So blue aerogram for Swamiji. We didn't call him Prabhupada yet, so let's take it. We turned the stove off. We ran upstairs to his quarters, and knock on the door. He comes to the door, and Janaki goes, "You have a letter, Swamiji?" So he picked a letter, and he's standing there, and she's like, "Aren't you going to read it?" So to oblige her, he opened the letter, he read it. He didn't say anything. So she goes, "Good news, Swamiji? Good news?" And he goes, "Yes, my sister has died." Well, you could imagine that's good news. We're like a little shock look on our face. And Swami and Prabhupada noted that, and he goes, "My sister was a devotee. She went back to Godhead." And that was one of those moments we say in English, aha moments, like, this is really deep. Whatever it is, this Krishna consciousness is very deep when good news is that your sister has died, but then explained she went back to Godhead. So those were a few things, could go on and on, but now we have time for the questions and answers. If hopefully I can answer your questions.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Mataji. I mean, I am just calling you Mataji.
No, that's fine. Just let me explain clearly. You
Yeah.
call me Mataji, it's not a problem. We're having a conversation. But when I'm being addressed,
Sure.
when I'm being introduced, my name isn't Mataji. That's a different thing. My name is Malati Devi Dasi, given to me by Prabhupada. But we're having a conversation. Oh, Mataji, can you do this or that? No problem. Hare Krishna.
Sure.
I hope you understand.
Yes, I understand, Mataji. Thank you for very nicely correcting me, Mataji. Mataji, thank you so much for sharing such wonderful pastimes with Srila Prabhupada. It is so amazing and inspiring how all of you disciples completely surrendered your life to Srila Prabhupada. And how you mentioned, right, you had Prabhupada's back, right? Wherever he was, you felt that protection with Srila Prabhupada. Very nice.
He had our back.
Oh,
Prabhupada had our back.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Actually, we've read some of these pastimes in Srila Prabhupada Leelamrit, but it is always so endearing and wonderful to hear it from someone who's been so close with Srila Prabhupada. It makes our connection with Srila Prabhupada all the more stronger. Thank you, Mataji. And very, very wonderfully, you shared the transcendental qualities of Srila Prabhupada. I especially like the one, that letter, what you mentioned, how Srila Prabhupada, Abai lost his mother at the age of 14, and now he's got young mothers to take care of him. So that was so sweet. So thank you so much.
Srila Prabhupada told my husband Shamsundar, he said, a child can live without the father, but it's living death without the mother. Just see how important the mother is. He called living death without the mother.
Very wonderful. Thank you, Mother. Actually, I can now request devotees. So if you have any queries, you can either raise your hands or you could put your questions in the chat box. In the meanwhile, I just want to quickly ask one more question. Mataji, it is said that you also cooked for Srila Prabhupada. And also, you along with Shamsundar Prabhu used to travel with Srila Prabhupada in his travels. So if you can share some pastimes, of what Srila Prabhupada liked to eat, something around those pastimes where you cooked for Srila Prabhupada, something that he liked very much. And also during the travel, some interesting aspects of Srila Prabhupada, if you can just share, Mataji.
So far as diet, it depended on where we were. It depended on his health. It depended on availability. For example, one time in England, in the beginning, it was the first Raviotra that Prabhupada attended, which meant 73. Shamsundar found a mango. Well, now mangoes are everywhere in the world, like anything. At that point in time, finding a mango in London was like finding a diamond on the street. And Shamsundar was really excited that after the parade, he would make a mango lassi for Srila Prabhupada and offer it to him. So he came back to Bury Place, and which at that point was being worked on still. And he offered this mango lassi. And Srila Prabhupada was very pleased by the offering. And he said the gopis were always trying to please Krishna, and they'd have competition. But the competition between the gopis was a loving competition. They weren't, like in the material world, if there's competition, I want to smash you, right? Like the runners are running and one gets faster than the other to break the no, the gopis, oh, look what this gopis did. Let me try. And that way bringing up and up the loving affairs. So he gave that example. It was very nice. Well, there is one cooking situation that quite often I get asked about, and I can tell it again. It occurred in Mayapur. As it was in Mayapur at that time, it was not developed. In fact, we hadn't been there yet. It was the first Gur Purnim festival. And if you've been to Mayapur recently, it's hugely developed. The road is paved, there's shops, you can buy air conditioners and washing machines. There's even a petrol station. None of that existed. It was a dirt road full of potholes. Bhakti Siddhanta Marg. That was it. There was not even a chaiwala stand. Nothing. Just on our side, rice paddy and the Ganga or the Hooghly on the other side. So Prabhupada had come ahead, and Shamsundar as his secretary had come with him. And the only building in Mayapur at that point was the little Bhajan Kutir that still exists. That was Prabhupada's quarters. The rest of us came to Calcutta and got on trains, and then from trains to Krishnagar, and then from Krishnagar we took a bus. And I mean, we'd already gone through a few culture shocks, but this was really another level of culture shock for us, like being out in the nowhere. And the bus stops, we get down, there was no barrier wall. We just like walked down the little embankment. And I remember, the only source of water beside the river was the hand pump. And there was no irrigation, so you had to step in mud to get to the hand pump. And I'm standing there with my daughter, who promptly disappeared. I had a metal trunk that I carried with me with my cooking utensils. Nobody said you'll cook for Prabhupada, but I knew the likelihood would be that I would be cooking for him, so I was prepared. So somebody came up to me and said, okay, I'll show you your kitchen. I'll show you where you're cooking. So I hadn't even been introduced to where I was going to stay, which was going to be a tent that had holes in it. My daughter had disappeared. Okay, I'm going. So the so-called kitchen was just the other side of the Bhajan Kutir. There wasn't even a covering over it. There were a few kind of limpy old vegetables, and I took that in, and then I looked inside, and okay, minimal. And I had the daily routine was in the morning, I had to go find the treasurer, and I had to ask him for some money. And it wasn't just, I have to ask you, I had to beg, and then I had to have a fight. He made me justify every paisa. And like one time I wanted money for a pineapple because Srila Prabhupada liked fresh pineapple, and he didn't want to give it to me because he said he only eats half of it. And obviously we had no refrigerators there at that point, so every day you had to do your shopping. So, I'd have to kind of have an argument with the treasurer to get the money I needed to get the boga for Prabhupada. And the boga was not there. I had to go to Navadvip. And to get to Navadvip, I had to walk down the road to get to the bus, to the boat ghat. And the boat ghat wasn't like it is nowadays. There's a ticket window. You can, it's pretty peaceful. At those days, though, you'd walk down from the main road down to the boat, and there would be some little fellow there blocking your way, trying to get money out of you. He was not anybody official. He was just an opportunistic person, whoever, he was trying to get money out of people. And I was a prime target, being a, Anglesi. So But what he didn't know was that I didn't have a pocket full of money. I had very little money, and every paisa counted. So I had to fight with that. You know, he would physically try to block me, and I'd have to push him away, and I'd finally get on the boat. And then, everybody else, they knew the price, but the boatmen would still try to cheat me. So there was another little argument. Get across the river, same thing. Another little fella trying to get money, get out there. And then I'd have to take a rickshaw to the marketplace. And obviously, even now, you have to fight the prices for the rickshaws. And then for the subject market, the fruit market. And if I had to get some, dairy products. And so each little effort was just a fight. It was like, I felt like, I don't know, maybe I was in Kurukshetra or something. So by the time I'd get back, it was the same thing happening on the way back. I'd get back to our place, having spent the morning fighting in battle. And then immediately I'd have to start cooking. Prabhupada would tell me what he wanted and to just get cooking. And I'm always thinking, how can I please him? How can I please him? And it seemed like every single day he was telling me something that wasn't quite right. And so I was trying to adjust and correct each day. And I'd be meditating, like from one day to the next on this, but it just seemed like I always did something not quite right. And one day I was kind of thinking, okay, I think I got it. A little pride creeps in, and he points out something, and I'm thinking, okay, and then the next day, whatever, it was like, okay, I really felt like maybe that day it was going to be okay. I bring it in, and he goes, why so much salt? Why so much? Because on the plate, there was be a little salt, a little pepper, some nimbu, some adrak chopped up on the side, right? Why so much? So the salt wasn't the preparation. It was just there in case he wanted more salt. But he was observing, I put too much salt. So why so much salt? And I thought, I'm not doing this right. Whatever I do, it's not right. And I mean, I had this daughter to take care of, and a husband to take care of. I'm like, maybe I shouldn't even be doing this service. So I started thinking, yeah, maybe I should get somebody who can do it more pleasingly. So I convinced myself that I should find somebody else to cook, and that would be better. And just having that thought, I started to feel a little like, okay, I felt, the anxiety decreased, the falsely decreased. So the next day, I'm thinking I was going to tell him, I'm going to find somebody else, it will be better that way. That was my plan. But the next day, I found out some godbrothers were coming. That was a big deal because there have been a lot of criticism by the godbrothers about us, the Westerners, the Malachas, they even criticized Prabhupada. He went, Swami Maharaj, he went to America, he associated with the Malachas, and another criticism was he had a female cook. That was me. So that kind of like didn't make me feel so great either, that they would make that criticism. So I thought, okay, I've got the solution here. And I was going to tell him, but then what happened? The godbrothers are coming. So I'm thinking, well, I won't be cooking today for sure. And the next thing I know, as I had that thought, Prabhupada wants to speak to you. Prabhupada, where are you? So I go to Prabhupada, making my obeisances, and he's starting to tell me what he wants me to cook for lunch. So I thought, okay, now is not the time to tell him. So I just, okay. And then I went about the normal, thing, getting the money, going to Navadip, getting back. And his wonderful godbrother Anand was doing the cooking for the guests. So I did my cooking. I came in with the plate, and this bhajan kutir was pretty simple. We did have electricity part-time, a single, like a little dangling light bulb in the middle of the room, and sometimes it even worked. So then there was a doorway with a curtain in between, a little tiny space in the back for a secretary and servant. So the curtain was a very elegant rice sack cut in half, opened up. So that was it, a burlap rice sack. We were pretty, basic then. So I pushed aside the rice sack curtain. I look inside, there's a little light bulb, it was working, and it was an astounding sight. There was Srila Prabhupada at the end of the room, and he was brighter than the light bulb. He was just like, his effulgence was just making the light of the room more than the light bulb. And then there was these elderly saintly sadhus sitting next to him. And I was suddenly, feeling intimidated to go in that room with these, that I suddenly realized that these were saintly persons. And I was there with Prabhupada, who was the most saintly person. How could I go in there? So I felt very intimidated, which was not my normal thing. So I just took my sari and I just put it way over my head like this, totally covered up my head. I got down on the floor and I had my elbows like on the floor. I'm on my knees, had the elbow, and I had the plate like this, but the sari was over my head. So just my hands were showing. And I crawled into the room. I put the plate down in front of Srila Prabhupada, and I'm making my obeisances. And he says, yes, she cooks for me. And I criticize her. When he said that, I was like a hit in the heart. I realized that my mentality had been completely wrong, that I was taking what he was telling me as criticism. And it wasn't criticism. He was responding to my desire. How can I serve better? How can I please? So he was telling me that my mundane, criticism. So right there, boom, he just cleared that up. And then he said, I criticize her, but she would slit her throat for me, and I would do the same for her. Now, that was a very intense statement. And although I was the person being referenced, it was actually intended to show these God brothers what our relationship, all of us, was with Srila Prabhupada. When I say he had our back, he would do we would do anything for him, and he would do anything for us. And that is what kept us going. And so I backed out of that room. That idea of quitting was like, wasn't going to happen. And the next day it was so amazing. I had to go through the whole thing, get the money, fight. It was totally ecstatic. By Srila Prabhupada's beautiful correction of my consciousness, what was formerly such a burden became completely ecstatic. I'm sure some of you might have had that type of experience when in your service, when it was just like, oh my God, this is so much, how can I do it? And then suddenly the consciousness is adjusted and the same thing became totally blissful. So I had that wonderful experience.
Thank you so much, Mataji, for sharing that. That's so much of loving reciprocation with Srila Prabhupada. I can see a lot of wonderful comments on the chat box. Immense gratitude for sharing such wonderful teachings of His Divine Grace. Thank you for giving us such fallen souls a wonderful opportunity to listen to the close disciples of Swamiji. So there is a question from Leela Manohar Das Prabhu. He says, Hare Krishna, wonderful sharing of Srila Prabhupada Katha. What prasadam cooked by you was liked most by Srila Prabhupada?
I don't know. As I already said in the beginning, it was according to the climate, according to the country, what is available or not, and according to, in a large degree, according to his health. But I will say, he did like Bengali prasadam. I have to say, because of that, I also love Bengali prasadam. In fact, today I'm preparing Kerala, grown here in New Vrindavan. Jackfruit sabji, he taught me when we went to Mayapur. He got, I had, I didn't have even a kitchen counter. I didn't, I had to be down on my knees. And I had one of those, I can't remember the name of it. It's a knife that's on, you use your foot. And the knife is curved blade with a little itchy thing in the front. So you can, slice, and then you can use the front part for shredding the coconut. So it's very simple cooking utensils. But according to the climate, if he wasn't well, then a very thin khichdi with mung bean and the rice. The only, like nowadays, the devotees they'll make like khichdi and they put so many vegetables in it, it's almost a subji. But Prabhupada in general, maybe some peas, maybe a little bit of cauliflower, but he didn't, the khichdi was khichdi, it stood on its own, you know. If he wasn't well, just a very thin khichdi, the rice and the split mung without the skin, and the ghee would be put in afterwards, you know, afterwards. And another thing, if he wasn't well, he would take suji and either milk and water, depending on his feeling, what he would do that, but it would be made very thin, so practically drinkable. And didn't have ghee on that. He would just have a little bit of mystery smashed up on the side. So he put a little mystery in the spoon, and then he would like take it like that. And so even myself, if I'm not feeling well, I like this. Very easy to digest, you know. And you can do it anywhere, any country, you know. Otherwise, you know, rice dal and chapati was always there. That was always happening. One time when we were in South India, we went to what is now, what do they call it? It was Chennai. They call it Chennai now, right? But so we were there. It was called Madras back in those days, and we had been invited by someone, and we were staying. Devotees were staying in different places, but Shamsundar was staying with Prabhupada as his secretary, and I was staying as his cook in this compound of this post. And what I noticed right away was by the front door, there was this really tall Tulsi plant. I mean, it was like almost 6 feet tall and just very flourishing. So the family itself, they weren't Vaishnavas, but still they had this beautiful Tulsi. They were vegetarians, but not Vaishnav. So Prabhupada flew, but I took a train, one of those 3-day trains from Mumbai to Chennai, and it was called 3-tier on the board, and then we were in the cheapest part of the train, and just, you know, just wood there. And at night they would bring out another shelf, and there would be like 3. You'd be, you know, the bottom shelf, the middle shelf, the top shelf. And I was very sick. I had gotten from our program up in, we had been in Jaipur, and I had contracted, what do you call it when you turn yellow? Jaundice. So somehow at that point, devotees had this idea, if you drink limca would cure jaundice. I'm telling you, to this day, if I see a limca bottle, I feel nauseous. But anyway, I came down there on every stop, and 2 devotees were with me and my daughter, and they were both sannyasis. So whatever, they would like shove a bottle of limca in my face because they wanted me. They knew I was going to be cooking, and you know, I had to get over this jaundice as soon as possible, like in 3 days. So we get there, and you know, there was a cooking, not. It was adjacent to the house, this little area where I would cook. And the lady of the house came and she said, "Can I help you?" Well, I knew that Srila Prabhupada wanted his disciples to do the cooking. That's why I was there. At the same time, I was not feeling really great. And I'm not really the best chapati maker in the world. In fact, I never make them now at all. I would only make them for Prabhupada. But, you know, they weren't the greatest. So I had noticed that this lady, she made really good chapatis. So I thought, I'll make the dough and she could do the chapatis. And she agreed. So when I brought the tray in, Prabhupada looks and he goes, "Who made the chapatis?" Because right away he knew it wasn't me. And I said, "It was that lady, you know, the lady, I forgot her name, you know." And he thought, it's all right. She has that Tulsi. Because based on that Tulsi, even though they were Mayavads, because of the beautiful Tulsi, he accepted her to make the chapatis every day, you know.
Thank you, Mataji. I can see very wonderful comments here. We have Angel Mataji, Neha Mataji saying, it's a great fortune to hear from you, someone who's so closely associated and served Srila Prabhupada. And we have Ramya Krishnan Mataji who's asking, can you please share as to how Srila Prabhupada felt when the deity of Lord Jagannath was first brought to him?
I mean, what do you think? You're asking me, how did Prabhupada feel? You'd have to ask him. And I don't think how he felt is really all that important, but we do know he made obeisances. It was a small wooden figurine. I didn't bring it to him as is falsely reported. I got that little figurine and I brought him to our apartment. And I put him on a shelf over the fireplace. In those days, devotees had it. We somehow thought that furniture was something devotees didn't have or didn't need. No beds, no chairs, no table, nothing, So I put him on this little shelf that was part of the fireplace. So after some time sitting there, Sham Sundar and Mukunda took it to Prabhupada, because they thought, well, maybe he would know what it was. And to their astonishment, he made obeisances. And he goes, who has found? They were looking to one another in a little bit astonishment. They go, Malati, well, call her. So his servant went down, and I was down, as I was always in the kitchen quite often in those days, early days. So this would be about March of 67. He'll call her. So there was an elevator to go up to his place, but I was young then. I could go faster than the elevator, so I ran up those stairs, and I came in and I saw the little figurine on his desk. His desk was actually a metal trunk, very common metal trunk from India, where he kept everything. And he said, so you have found? I said, yes. There's a backstory to this, but I don't think I have time to tell it. So I said, yes. And then he turns, he goes, this is Lord Jagannath, Lord of the universe. This is Krishna. Yeah. And he turns to Sham Sundar and he says, Sham Sundar, can you carve big size? And he gave, with his hand, he indicated. Immediately, Sham Sundar said, yes. So then he goes to me, were there others? So I was thinking, in terms of quantity, because there were 3 barrels and 3 different types of icons. So I said, yes, lots, because they were filled up. And he goes, no, he Prabhupada was very sober. He goes, no, 2 others different. Yes. He says, bring them. This is Jagannath, and that other 2 are his brother and sister. And I'm remembering the white-faced one and the yellow-faced one. So Sham Sundar was asked to carve. Immediately he agreed, and thus began another adventure and another aspect of life in ISKCON. And in July of 67 was the first Raviotra, which I mentioned. Prabhupada couldn't attend due to ill health, but the first Raviotra ever outside of India occurred. If you Google San Francisco Raviotra 67, there's a short clip. You'll see a short clip of that festival. We didn't have a hand pull cart. It was on the back of a truck, a flatbed truck, as per Prabhupada's suggestion, because there was no time to build a cart. The first hand pulled cart was the following year in 68. And then just one cart at that point, And this next week, I'm flying to California, and next weekend, I will be attending San Francisco Raviotra once again.
Hey, wonderful. Thank you, Mataji, for sharing that. His Grace Radhanath Krishnadas Prabhu is asking, Mataji, you got personal attention and care to have this loving feeling and reciprocation according to Srila Prabhupada. But since we do not have the same attention and care, how do we develop such love and affection for Srila Prabhupada?
Through service.
Jai.
That I already mentioned, through service. You know, when you go in your temple and you see there's something out of place, don't wait for someone else to do it. Don't wait to be asked, just do it. If you see there's something needs to be cleaned, just do it. Because Srila Prabhupada was very attentive to detail and he was very mindful of cleanliness. So don't wait to be asked. If you see the books are out of order, repair it. If you see some dust somewhere, dust it off. Do some service on his behalf, and he will be pleased, and you'll know it. You know, read his books and discuss them with others. You know, before you get into all the other books, read Prabhupada's books. Radhanath Swami, a very exemplary guru and Vaishnava, he told us for 16 years he only read Srila Prabhupada's books. And that gave him a deep, deep foundation and loving regard for Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you, Mataji. So I don't see any further questions on the chat box. There are a lot of comments expressing gratitude to you, Mataji, for taking time out. Mataji, actually, we just want to mention a little bit of endeavor that we have taken as part of Evolve Pune initiative under the leadership of His Grace Madan Sundar Prabhu, wherein we have organized this Srila Prabhupada Smaranotsav, where we invited Srila Prabhupada's disciples to hear wonderful realizations in close contact, in close service of Srila Prabhupada. Like we read in Srila Prabhupada Lilamrit in chapter 4, where Srila Prabhupada says, the first time I asked his Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who would listen to our message, our country is under British rule. And I was very happy being defeated by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And in chapter 4, he mentions, after that, I didn't ask Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur any other question except, how can I serve you? So your answer also, pretty much reflected the same mood that we can develop that connection with our spiritual master, with Srila Prabhupada, just by service. So, so we have organized also this Srila Prabhupada quiz contest, Mataji, for which we would seek your blessings and your encouragement, so that all our participants in the Zoom as well as in YouTube, and who will be watching this YouTube session later on, since it's also live telecast on YouTube, to encourage all of us, why it's important to read Srila Prabhupada, why it's important to know Srila Prabhupada, and why is it important to take part in this quiz. So some words from you would be nice, Mataji, if you can just share.
Well, I thank you very much for making this endeavor. It's, as I mentioned in the beginning of my talk, Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON, we're members of his society. It's not our society, it's his society. And it will always be his society. Therefore, it's very good of us. It's good for our spiritual health and advancement to pay attention to Srila Prabhupada's teachings and to understand his teachings, and to take part in this endeavor means to know more about Srila Prabhupada. Because it's just like if you don't know something about someone, and you're saying, well, serve that person. How do I serve if I don't know anything about them? You need to know something about them. What pleases them, or what have you. So it's important that we understand Srila Prabhupada in many facets. Srila Prabhupada is a great Acharya. He was a great teacher. He was an international global statesman for Bhakti Yoga. He said that in 1966 in a newspaper article in Butler, Pennsylvania, that I am an ambassador for Bhakti Yoga to the West. So we are his sub-ambassadors. Just like Lord Caitanya deputed Nityananda and Haridas to go out, whoever you meet, and join them to chant Hare Krishna, right? Srila Prabhupada told us, 67 July, I want you boys and girls to push on this movement. Do you think that was a one-time statement? That is a standing statement. That is a standing order. It will always be there for all time for every member of ISKCON. So if you want to please Srila Prabhupada, help him by pushing on this movement, which means you also have to become spiritually educated and spiritually fit.
Thank you so much, Mataji. We actually look forward to more of your association as your time permits. If you can give us your association, because I think we are running out of time. But we want to hear from you more and more. We've got some more questions on the chat box, but unfortunately, due to time constraint, we may not be able to ask now. So thank you so much, Mataji, for taking time out of your busy schedule and giving us your association. So as and when your time permits, we would like to have more and more of your association, Mataji. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your endeavor, and I wish you great success. Not you personally, personally also, but like on the overall aspect, I wish success, because the success of this endeavor will contribute toward the ongoing success of ISKCON. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Mataji. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. For grace, Malati Mataji ki jai. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you so much, Mataji. Hare Krishna. So thank you very much, dear devotees. Hope you all had a great time in this transcendental journey of Srila Prabhupada Smaranotsav. Today is actually the grand finale event, actually, where we had the association of Her Grace Malati Mataji, who had such close association and service opportunity and served Srila Prabhupada so nicely that Srila Prabhupada said, I have such young mothers to take care of me. So that was a lovely relationship between Her Grace Malati Mataji and other Janaki Mataji, Yamuna Mataji with Srila Prabhupada. So on behalf of Evolve Pune and His Grace Madan Sundar Prabhuji, we'd like to thank all of you for being part of this journey. Of course, the journey still continues. The next step, the more important step in Srila Prabhupada Smaranotsav series is to take part in the Srila Prabhupada International Online Quiz Contest. So there's no constraint of time, place. So we can take part in this International Online Quiz Contest. As you all know that the contest is already open and would be open until 14th of August. 2022, right? So I'm sure all of you have registered. In case you've not registered, kindly do register immediately, and also please share it with all of your near and dear ones, because more than winning, it is an opportunity that we're giving to people to read about Prabhupada, to hear about Prabhupada, and that in itself is the greatest success. So as you all would know that there are 3 categories: 7 to 10, 11 to 14, and 15 plus categories. So you could register in evolvepune.com. The link has been shared in all of the groups. And also we have a Zoom group, which where we are also undertaking the regular study of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrit on a daily basis. That happens between 4 and 4:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. So we request you also to participate in that also whenever time permits. The results for the contest would be announced in Srila Prabhupada Smaranotsav group. So we wish everyone all the best to prepare and attempt the quiz. And for any queries, you may write to any of the admins of the Srila Prabhupada Smaranotsav groups. So with this, on behalf of Evolve Pune team, headed by His Grace Madan Sundar Prabhu, I'd like to thank all of you all for being part of this wonderful Srila Prabhupada Smaranotsav journey. Hope you all enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed it presenting it to all of you. We would like to seek forgiveness for any mistakes that might have occurred in this endeavor. Thank you all very much. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta Koti Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you. Hare Krishna.